Welcome to Season 2 of Frontline Fridays, brought to you by Ubik. I'm your host, Ron Thurston, and this season, we're challenging how leaders think about the front line, not as a cost to manage, but as a competitive advantage to unlock. Today's conversation is about operations, but not in the way we usually talk about it. It's about profit, and it's about value creation, and it's about untapped commercial power sitting inside retail operations teams every single day. My guest today is Monika Espinoza, a retail operations architect and commercial performance leader with more than 25 years of experience transforming operations from cost centers into profit drivers. Monika has spent over a decade at Louis Vuitton, most recently as the director of retail operations, where she led large, complex regional operations across the Southeast, driving performance, efficiency, and margin protection at scale. Her background also includes senior operations and loss prevention leadership roles at Abercrombie & Fitch, Bloomingdale's, and Sports Authority, giving her a rare end-to-end view of retail risk, performance, and execution. Today, Monika is the founder and CEO of Better Way Operations, where she works hands-on with retail organizations to build what she calls a commercial mindset, helping operations teams understand how their daily work drives revenue, protects margin, and delivers meaningful client value. Through her one-step ahead methodology, she guides intentional cultural shifts across strategy, team development, efficiency, and performance. So let's dive in. Monika, welcome to Frontline Fridays. I am really excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, so thankful, Ron. It's been an incredible journey and great meeting you just a couple of months ago. I think the pleasure is mine in being on Frontline Fridays with you.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I was going to mention that, sometimes guests of the show are people I've known for decades because I'm 150 and been doing this forever. And sometimes they're new people that I meet like you. And when we met, it was very clear that your passion around ops and the impact that you've had in these incredible brands you've worked for, I needed to hear your story. So right away, I was like, will you be on the show? So
Yeah.
here we are. We're both here in Miami, so we will continue to develop our relationship over time.
Yeah, very appreciative of that. And, really you welcoming me on onto the show was I felt so honored, right? As following Ron Thurston has been in the last couple of months very exciting for me. The platform that you've created and really allowing the voice of retail to spread out to the masses is really impactful. And I'm very thankful to be given the opportunity to chat today and really dig deeper into the world of operations.
Fantastic. So let's jump in right there because you've been on the ops side. And I think one of the reasons that I very much enjoy speaking to people that are in ops is because it was never my strength. I was the head of stores, but I was a front of house guy. I was always the one in the wanting to speak to the team, like front of house team and customers and product and much more front of house than back of house. But I always had a strong back of house partner. And so when I think about your background and what you've learned, give us the insight about ops and the stories behind it, about things that people might miss about the importance of the magic behind the curtain.
That's a great way and a great place to start really is my experiences within the operations is really an asset protection non-sale departments really throughout my retail career have really built where my passion today lies. And I'll start by saying that being in various retail environments, various store sizes, volumes, specialties, right? Retail, luxury to specialty retail, big box. I think one consistent thing has been the biggest opportunity or miss that I see. And you opened it with that, right? The conversations that are had in stores when they're dealt or directly to the selling teams are very much conversations, and they're conversations around business and dollars and conversion and sell through. And when we have conversations with our selling partners, the conversations are very much task driven, and this big disconnect as though we're in the same store and we have the same mission and the same vision, but we're speaking two separate languages. And so coming from being in retail and really moving up through different series of positions, I learned that this big gap was such a big miss in how we were missing productivity really from our back of house partners simply because of the way that we were really addressing those day-to-day conversations.
Absolutely agree. And sometimes it can feel even awkward of you're right. We're speaking one language to a percent of the team, but it's not the full team. And the full experience for the customer involves the entire team, right? Particularly in luxury, because the operations and the importance of time and being neat and organized just becomes much more important as the price point goes up. So for you, you think about it as a profit center too, is that ops is really the driver of potentially untapped profit.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I get it. Operations isn't everybody. It's not fun for everybody, right? Untangling a chain that is knotted is not for everyone, right? I will do that all day. And so I think that's where there's the beauty of retail, really, is that we all wear such unique hats. And when we all come together and we can figure out how all these different hats can really propel the ship forward. I think that's really where the beauty of operations is really coming. And the challenge for operations that I see today is we're at a crossroads because the more retail is evolving and as consumers we're evolving, we're changing how we expect an experience and the value that we see in retail stores. Operations and these client-centric touch points are becoming more operational. And so we're missing really closing the gap on performance and profitability with utilizing this maybe 20 to 30% of our headcount and community within stores to really be encouraged to think differently. And so that's where I see it as there is such missed potential, right? If we speak to these teams just a little bit differently and if we approach the conversation from a different angle, I think the results for an organization can be astronomical. And I've seen it, I've lived it within retail stores. And to your point, the detail becomes more fine. The experience of the client is now a faraway experience and not just an in-store experience. So how we are elevating these operations teams in stores is critical now that we're a multi-channel consumer.
Well, and because think about how operations has changed, and not just in luxury, but I would just say as an industry overall the last just 5 years. And so you think about, buy in line, pick up in store, which has exponentially grown. You think about inventory, and for many brands, the distribution centers are spread across the fleet of stores. That's where they fill all e-commerce orders. The efficiency, the kind of pressure on margin that has happened the last couple of years. You think about profitability, one of the drivers of that, of course, is margin, which then we start to talk about damage and loss prevention,
Right.
all the things that impact product margin, full price sell through. You can't fill it on an e-com order if you can't find it. So it's the complexity of ops has only gotten harder.
Yeah.
And I think so people like you that really see this and say, if we speak differently, if we potentially onboard, train, hire, and place equal importance on ops as maybe we do front of house, that we could run a much more profitable business.
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
does that resonate with you?
Yeah, and you said it perfectly. And really my vision is always I put myself in this space where I feel operations responsibility within stores is to maximize the top line while protecting your bottom line. And they hold this beautiful responsibility of how do they produce more to allow your sellers to deliver that experience. And at the same time, to your point, they're dealing with the after sales client and the return and the shrink and all these other different things that are impacting the bottom line. So they are in between really trying to push this pyramid, and the mindset needs to shift, right? Because the idea is that we place operations associates in a win-win position where operators in stores understand that they are now way farther from the processing of shipment, that their role is now the client that is distant. And how are we teaching those skills? A few years ago, I learned that a luxury jewelry store trained their call center, for example, to be able to describe a diamond ring to a client over the phone and be able to close a sale on a diamond purchase. In my mind, operators should also be trained in this scope, right? And why are we not opening the door to who else within the organization needs to learn these specific skills that is touching clients at every angle? And so it's about proactive thinking so that we're ahead of the curve. And as we continue to evolve and add more layers to what's happening in the back of our house.
And simultaneously, as all of that has happened, there's also, because of this pressure on profitability, is a pressure on headcount. So in many ways, you think about smaller teams, not necessarily Vuitton, where you most recently came from, but in majority of brands, there's not a large back of house team, that supports it. Maybe it's one person, and maybe they have to do all of it. And so everyone in the team really needs to be trained. And you're right, the mindset of ops isn't about tasks. It isn't about loss prevention. It isn't about finding that one dress for that e-com order. It's about the overall success of your business and how everyone can actually learn and become an entrepreneurial mindset in my mind.
Absolutely. And 100% that one employee in a store is maybe with 10 selling associates, right? Or maybe one or two. But that one employee needs to be developed to be able to share their mind. What I find a lot is there's even lack of development in confidence of how they're coming to the table. And they know a lot. And long are the days where just organization in a back of house was enough. That mindset now needs to understand, if I want their buy-in, if I want the selling team's buy-in to understand how I'm setting up the back of house to support your selling efforts, I need to create relationships. How do I create relationships? This is what builds leaders. And so it's about training really an operations associate to understand the entire scope of retail and not just you process shipment, you put it out wherever it fits in the back of house and your shift is done. There's a science now to all of it. There's a science behind, if you're putting product right next to the door in your back of house, it has to make sense. And so that's really where my passion comes in is, are we looking at the store as a whole to say, how are we drawing traffic within the selling floor? Where are we backstocking product? Does it make sense to the traffic and where we want to take clients within the building? If there's a social media area of the store that we really want to highlight, well, maybe we put some of our hot products or in that area, because when the associate walks over there, so will the client. And now we're drawing social media engagement. But that developing that mindset in an operator takes intention, and it takes really purpose and understanding what's the vision. Okay, I need to translate this now to my back of house team as well, not just stop at the front. It all comes full circle.
Full circle. But I think ultimately, it's one of the reasons I love this business so much, is because you learn how to be an entrepreneur at the most granular level. And so even though the majority of us that have worked in retail will never run our own retail chain, some do, most that's not what we do. We love it, but our name's not on the front. And so what you're describing is an understanding of the core foundations of entrepreneurship. And some of it's product placement, it's also assortment. Talk about service, you talk about traffic, that it's merchandising and operations function. So you're taking often a back of house team that is often relatively first job, second job. It's kind of how you get in sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you're teaching them how to be an entrepreneur, how to have a business mindset, how to impact a multi-million-dollar business. And so like a year into your first job, this is what I speak to students about. A year in, you now have the core foundation understanding in a hands-on way of how to run a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah.
And what other job could say that?
Right.
That's why I could come in as a part-time stock associate and a year later know how to run a business, with no education, because they have people like you who love the back of house and have taught them things about how to drive that business. I can't say enough positive things about why it isn't front versus back. It's not us versus them. we are here together to run a business. And you and I think we are very aligned there.
I think that's a perfect next point that I would love to share is really how divided the teams can become when we start sharing two separate missions or visions, right? When we start speaking about dollars and performance and output, specific, very granular, and we have very specific details with one party, and a different part of the store is very much a checklist. And so the teams can start, well, I don't need to jump on the floor and help because, well, I don't know what's happening out there, right? And I don't need to put product back the right way, well, because who knows what's happening back there, right? And so we start working in parallels. The magic that happens when these two can bridge, right? When an operations associate can understand, if I fill all the printer paper in the morning, then my teams never have to worry about that. And if I can move the printer closer, or to move that POS system just a little bit over, I will stop this bottleneck on the selling floor, or right. And so when we start thinking that way, now there's camaraderie because, oh, they helped me. And so now we start creating these layers of, to your point, at a very young age when people are just reaching retail stores. I have great memories of 18 and 19-year-olds that when I walk through malls now or, pull me aside to say, hey, I'm interviewing for a manager role now, right? And so it's those skills that they learn when they don't really realize that it's leadership. How are you having a conversation with your counterpart on the selling floor to talk about how you're going to reach the next goal, or what their challenges are, or where they're seeing hiccups with the POS, and what can we do as an operator to make them press maybe 2 buttons instead of 9 to get to that same function that we do 100 times a day. All that is time, and it's time is money, right? And so when you start creating this bridge where they start helping each other, it's powerful for an organization. It's powerful for a store, for a district, a region. When that can happen, when that magic becomes one, there's mutual respect, right? The profits are incredible because the goal just comes because you have positive habits really promoting profit. And so it's just really, to me, it's one of the most exciting parts is really when you start seeing teams really holding hands and understanding each other's function. I always call my client development partners were my yin yangs, right? Where one is on a yacht entertaining clients, I'm opening boxes, getting ready for the event. At the end, our mission establishes itself because we're both wearing our hat. We understand the value we each bring to the organization.
I love it. I absolutely agree with you. So if I take a step forward through all of your incredible experience with these brands, you have now launched your own company to help support this growth and this mindset shift called One Step Ahead. So I introduced it in the beginning, but walk us through what is One Step Ahead? Why did you want to bring your thought process and all this expertise out into the greater, broader retail industry?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And it's my secret sauce. It's the way I've approached everything. From change management to a new rollout or even a bottleneck. And so STEP stands for strategy, team, efficiency, and performance. Each one has its own breakdown of what it means, right? We don't just jump into the pool. We maybe want to feel what that feels like first. Dip a toe in. How is everyone else feeling? This is our strategy part, right? How does that move us forward? Are we thinking of every angle before we jump into the pool? What does this look like? How is it going to impact client experience? How is it going to impact our teams? What is the seamlessness of the rollout? Where could there potentially be a problem? Let's get ahead of those things. Then we have, of course, your team. The most important part, right, is do we have the right people and the right talent in place to deliver X? If we don't, what do we need? What skill sets? What other brand is doing something similar that we can maybe recruit from or that we maybe need to keep an eye on? What does the future look like? Or how are we building positions for this new rollout in 6 months to a year to really encourage development, right? We're not just going to roll out, for example, a new inventory program. We want to build structures so that maybe there's a promotion to a specialist or to a leadership position down the line. And then talent acquisition, right? How are they recruiting and finding the next set of talent? Then we have efficiency, of course. Do they have the tools are they able to move through the store and deliver what the ask is? What is A to Z, or like sunrise to sunset, which I like to say? What does that look like within the building? Is everything they need at their fingertips to be able to deliver? And then ultimately is your performance. How are we gauging that change? What does that look like? What metrics do we want to see come true? What do they need to be able to deliver on those metrics? Are they trained for it, et cetera? So it all comes full circle. And to me, STEP has been a way that I naturally have approached everything. I think it creates a foundation that is really pragmatic for the organization. It really creates stability. The teams don't feel shaky ground every time there's a new rollout. They can trust the process. They can adapt a lot better. And so there's a lot of energy behind STEP because leaders can see the difference in their teams, and they can understand a little bit more of what is happening behind those back doors, and also how to make the most of that head count, how to maximize, how to challenge without overwhelming. Because a challenge is engaging, but when a challenge becomes too much because we just throw everything, and we lose that trust from our teams. So leaders in turn see this approach and can really adapt to it themselves.
And easy to understand both the steps and the kind of the acronym, but also the behaviors behind it. And as I'm listening to you describe it, I'm also thinking this is not also just about the store or fleet. This is about, if I think about efficiencies, who are all of my corporate business partners? So there's efficiency in the store and operations, but then it's finance. Is it in planning allocation? Is it in loss prevention? Is it in talent acquisition and HR? Because any of those departments that I just listed, and there are more, can bottleneck efficiency. Right. So it's the store could be incredibly efficient or could be have incredible talent, but it requires an entire organization top down to think about your step process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. Is the reality is when this is shared and people understand how to approach anything, any department can even use, right? If visual merchandising has a window change out and they're going to work for 7 days straight, well, what is your strategy to get this completed? Who's going to work? Are you staggering your team, or is everyone working 24 hours a day, right? Which unfortunately happens. What is the efficiency going to look like so that you all don't burn out, right? And what is the performance? Like what ROI do we want to see from your new window installation? Who is owning the turnover of this product? And so every department for nearly anything, we can really use this process to identify and at least tackle every part of a bottleneck or an upcoming challenge or an upcoming event so that we can really deliver it without burning out our teams, burning ourselves out as leaders, and ensure that we're taking in the right partners because there is so much overlap in retail, and that's the truth. We're all holding hands at some point, even if it's far away. We're still holding hands, and so it's about finding who else can. You bring up a great point, like who else in your organization is dealing with the same thing, but in their siloed route, and how do you engage them to say, "Hey, we're both partners in this. How can we tackle this together?"
Well, I'm also thinking, as new technologies being developed, as new AI solutions, and there are many. I have daily calls with a new one all the time. The first place I go is what are we solving for? What's potentially broken in your step methodology? Where is it? And then how do we insert technology to solve that one particular problem? And so I think often people, leaders, and brands get caught up in trying to solve everything, which you could say, well, actually, under these the four pillars of step, what part of that is broken? Now let's go find a solution that solves that. And I think that actually helps people kind of break it down into easier to understand pieces that then they can go and find a solution for, and then they know what they're looking for, and they could honestly like have a better understanding of their budget at the same time. There's just multiple layers here that I think about when I hear you describe this.
Thank you for that. And it's so true. It's really about understanding what is our ultimate goal. And as you go through each one and you build it, yeah, you identify, oh wow, we don't have the team to back this up. I'm a big believer of not being a manager, right? And something comes on my inbox, I'm not just going to hit forward. Because as a leader, I hold the responsibility of translating. And I translate using stuff. You take anything. And before you forward it to your team or you create a change, how are you digesting this? You know your team better than anyone. And this is true for any level, right? At C level, at your regionals, your district managers, your in store managers. We all know our team so well. And so when something comes on our plate, begin with the end first, right? How is this going to impact my team? What is this journey going to look like for them? How is the client going to feel? And so you really can not avoid being that forwarding manager and just really sit with the task at hand, break it down, and then move forward with where you need to action.
And where have you seen, Monica, the biggest potential for risk? Whether it's now that you're consulting and bringing this to the greater industry, or in the brands you've worked for, where in step does it fall apart most commonly, in your opinion?
From experience, I will say that strategy is where I think we drop the ball right at the beginning. And it's not that we do it on purpose, right? I mean, Ubic just recently had a data share with 60% of the stats or the conversations that are had at C-level boardrooms are not making it to the retail front, right? It's the way that we say, and it's not on the C-level to translate it. It's every layer in between before it makes it that has to translate it, right? And so that's why I say those layers of understanding something yourself as a leader before the next layer is critically important because that's when we start watering down messages. That's where the vision doesn't equal the actions in store. And so to me, strategy is critically important. I think it's really where the ball drops. John Maxwell has a saying. He says, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the journey or the process to get there, right? We're so excited that we have a new inventory or a new POS system that we just want to be there tomorrow. But there's all these things that we need to do before we hit forward or before we introduce it to our team. So strategy is critically important for it to continue to and be adoptable.
It's funny because another recent guest, Kevin Ertel, who just published a book called The Strategy Trap, exactly for that reason of like, if you don't lay this out in the beginning, clearly he talks about a kind of 6 C's of execution in his book. Nothing else happens. So he tells all these stories. He's currently going through a posting about example after example after example of what was the strategy trap, where did it fall apart, why did it end up, this is the outcome long term. So it's really funny that you say that, because if you're not right out of the gate, I also think it's the willingness to share the strategy all the way down, whether you think they actually want to hear it, need to hear it or not. There's this thing often in our business, there's the sense of, well, does the store really need to know? Does everyone, if 20% of the company headcount works in corporate, 80% works in the field, but only a small percentage of the company knows the strategy, the 80% don't,
It's not.
your likelihood of success is really low. And I've heard it more than once in my career of like, well, does everyone need to know? Do they care? Will they understand? And my answer is always yes. Like, don't assume someone doesn't want to understand what your greater strategy is, because they're watching. They're watching us. They're watching the business. They're watching the future employment. They're choosing their careers. There's so many reasons to over communicate about strategy. I love that you said that.
I'd love to follow up on that because more than anything is also they know, our front lines know if where your hiccups are going to be before we even have to do anything, right? I mean, they're the ones that are standing in front of that register when the POS or that new payment terminal freezes. And they're the ones that say, well, we could have just hooked it up back here and it would have worked, right? And you're like, oh my God, had we not listened to you guys, right? Or at least shared and opened the door to allow your insight. I can share from experience anytime As a regional, I always had one store manager that was the one that was going to push back on everything. And she was the one that I introduced everything to, because I knew if anyone was going to tell me where all the broken parts were going to happen, it was this one manager. And so I figured every time we had an event or we had any type of rollout, I would ask for an hour of her time and we would go through everything and we would talk about, okay, this is my idea. I'm going from, this point to this point. What are your thoughts? This is what we need to roll out. And she would say, I don't think this is going to stick with the team. I don't think clients are going to like this. And so I would go back to the drawing board and reconfigure things and try again. And that is the way to me. Is you have to include your front lines. You have to include, but you also need to understand who likes to do what. And you can't just randomly pick somebody or somebody who's just going to always tell you, oh, this is perfect. It has to be that more vocal manager. It has to be the one that thinks a little differently or wants to challenge a little bit more. It builds rapport as well. As a leader, when you allow them and allow them into your space like that, things don't become secret. We're all in it together, right? Missy, that was just on your show, shared the same thing. We really are in this all together, and so we have to work together. We need everybody's insight to understand, and that's where I think an operator comes into play to say, this is what we're all dealing with, but we'll be the center ones to gather all the different thoughts and then deliver it how it should be. So we can create the package, we can reach out to the different partners, but it's a centralized mindset or person. And it's no different in stores. It's really utilizing your operator at store to do the same actions, right? Walk around and ask the associates, will this work? And that operations associate now starts building relationships within their store the same way that I would with my regional partners, and that they would have the same conversations at their level. So it's all the same, but we have to continue that habit all the way down.
It's really true. It's just funny when you say that because that person you're describing that always pushes back on everything, why not use that to celebrate them and say, you know what, Monica, I know you're going to tell me everything. So I'm going to make sure that we share all of this. And I really value the fact that you push back on everything instead of being the annoying person that is going to do that. I just think that's celebrating your strengths. That's optimizing your human potential to just say, instead of encouraging you to stop doing that, encourage you, do it more, poke holes, tell me what's going to fail. I love having people like that around and to tell them why they're valuable because of those skills. I think it's fun.
I mean, guilty. I was that person, right? I was the person that's like, wait, why are we doing this? Right? We haven't found a discrepancy in shipment in a year. Why are we counting unit by unit? Right? Like I was that person that was annoying. To me, time is money, and we need to ensure that every hour is a productive hour within the business. And if we're doing tasks that don't make sense, so I was always the first one to say, like, this is outdated. This has to go. And maybe annoying at times to some of my leaders, but I think that's where my leaders then realize, like, oh, she's making my life a little easier because she's highlighting all the things that aren't working. And so I've adopted the same mindset and brought on other leaders that are a little bit more challenging.
And so, Monica, as we wrap up, as we think about people in organizations today, and this show has listeners at all levels, from sales and store managers, multi-store leaders, executives. If I'm running a store today and I want to think more about the step mindset, I want to think more about business, where should someone start that may have obstacles going up, obstacles going down? What's your advice to people that are anxious to run a more efficient and profitable business in 2026? I don't know anyone that wouldn't say yes to that.
Yeah.
What should they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, I'm a big fan of you have to do what's in your control, right? You have to take the team you have and you have to make the most of what you have, right? It's not about more headcount or more this or more that. Really focus on what you have. And when that is 100% stable, then you can assess what you need. What I would first say is within your operating teams, because that, of course, is where I lean and that's where my passion really lies, is to really understand what are they doing? What is happening their day to day? When they're coming in, what is that sense of urgency? What is their engagement to the business? Do they understand your selling goals? And it's way more than just posting it on a board and expecting them to read it, right? It has to make sense to the operator. We are unique in the stores. I 100% stand by that. After 25 years in retail, I know that non-sell teams are very different than the sell team. At the end of the day, our passion for the madness of retail is the same. And so as a leader, breaking that ice, standing side by side with your teams, understanding, I can almost guarantee that within minutes, you will start seeing things that make you scratch your head. You will start seeing behaviors or actions that you're like, I don't know that that's necessary anymore, right? Like I first would say, spend time with your teams and uncover where the problems are, uncover the tasks that don't make sense, question to corporate. No one's going to be mad at somebody for questioning the why. Like, why am I doing this? Do it for yourself as a leader, right? Look at it coming from an efficient perspective and a place of I'm big on avoiding burnout and really helping leaders see things differently so that we don't end up in burnout. Look at your calendar. Look at the way that you're showing up every day. Where are you showing up? How are you showing up? Who's showing up with you? Right? The things that we can control are critically important. And so I would really recommend any leader is to look at what is happening every day. Your cleaning team, your security guards, your vendor that's coming to fix the AC. Is everyone actually delivering and being productive within their time in your business? And if there's any question to that, that's where we need to start changing the conversation a little bit, creating engagement and tying it to what's happening with the overall vision of the business. But it's up to us as leaders to translate that, to be able to articulate it so that it makes sense to our teams, not pushing heavy C-level jargon, but really how do we speak, in our store? And this is what's going to make sense to my team. So I would highly recommend. I think that's a big easy thing that leaders can do to really change the game.
And be willing to be honest with yourself during that process.
Right.
That maybe you thought this was the way that it has always been done or should be done, but you've actually created some of those obstacles. So maybe it's also the time about just being honest and saying, you know what, I was wrong. And I appreciate all of this feedback, and we're going to try this and like unblock something that's working. So I think you're right. The deep dive with a willingness to learn and be humble can be game changing in a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're right on.
So, Monika, where can people find you that would love to learn from this wealth of experience that you have
Yeah.
to use in their own business?
Yeah, thank you. So betterwayoperations.com is my website. Because I feel there's always a better way. It comes from my Clifton strengths, my number one strength, really finding a new ways to redo and rethink how operations in stores are working and showing up every day. I'm also on LinkedIn, Monika Espinoza on LinkedIn as well, and happy to connect and have a conversation with anyone. I'm really excited about learning different industries and what others are really dealing with, because I think it's about helping us staying ahead of the game.
And we all learn from each other. And that's the beauty of shared experiences, is that we can all learn. So it's a real pleasure. So thank you. Thanks, Monika, for being on the show, having this conversation and sharing your experience with the industry. It will be a better place because of it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ron. This was incredible. I truly enjoyed our time together, and this conversation was really impactful. And I hope the retail teams really take a lot from it.
Sure they will. Thank you, Monika.
Thank you.
Monika made it clear that when leaders help teams understand why their work matters, how it drives profit, protects margin, and serves clients better, everything changes. Engagement rises, collaboration improves, and performance follows. For everyone listening, here's your challenge for the week. Stop looking at operations as a cost to manage and start seeing it as a capability to activate. Ask your teams how their work connects to the bottom line and help them connect the dots, because when people understand the impact they make, they show up differently. Thanks for tuning in, and a special thanks to Ubik, the presenter of Frontline Fridays. Ubik is the AI-powered platform that helps retail and hospitality leaders connect, train, and empower their teams. Ready to make your frontline your competitive advantage? Visit ubik.com. That's YOOBIC.com to learn more. Until next time, keep leading boldly and keep unlocking the profit potential of your teams.